So why did I write this book, or why did I start to think about writing the book? Because no one else was doing anything about it. That was I was attending a conference that was put on by News 24, and they were talking about the future of South Africa, and they spoke about all the important things, the politics and the crime and the climate things, but nobody mentioned race. And I couldn't quite understand how you could talk about the future of South Africa and not even mention race relations.
Sure.
It just, so I thought, okay, so I'm going to do it then. Yeah. And that's how the book started, and then I got involved with Nina. I asked her to join me on the project, and so that was the outcome. Right. So if we talk about racial polarization, at the end of the day, it's been a kind of a program, really, of division and separation for over 300 years.
Sure.
It starts off with the hierarchy of human values. So when people arrived here, the Europeans arrived back in the early days, they came with an air of superiority, and they believed they were inherently superior to the local people. And they created this thing called the hierarchy of human value, which actually ranks people according to their race, in terms of superiority all the way down to inferiority. And over the years, that whole theme is reinforced and enhanced until people start to believe in their own inferiority. And that was the work of Steve Biko. If you read all his books, he talks about that, and he says there's no greater weapon in the hands of the oppressor than the mind of the oppressed.
Sure.
And so that's what happened, is we started to get people to believe in their own inferiority. In fact, slavery is based on that. The slave owners were the ones that said, if we can get people to believe and accept their own inferiority, we can do pretty much what we want, and we can justify unequal treatment. And that has gone through the years for over 300 years and eventually into apartheid, where it was entrenched by law. So you have this mind manipulation, what I call the mindset of South Africa, where you get people to believe in their own superiority and others to believe in their own inferiority. And you keep re-entrenching that over the years. Okay, so the thing that comes to mind there, which played a big role, was the Bantu Education Act in 1953. So I studied all the laws over the years, the apartheid laws, and there were a couple that really had big impact. The one was the Native Land Act of 1913, and the other one was the Bantu Education Act of 1953, where Hendrik Verwoerd stood up in Parliament and said that black people shall never rise above the level of laborer, and therefore there is no need to teach them maths or science. And the underlying philosophy of that, of course, was if we can keep people uneducated, they will not be able to compete with us for control of the economy. So let's keep them as laborers, and then we can just use them in terms of white business and white households, and that's how we'll keep the situation. So you can imagine if you remove maths and science from the curriculum, the power of that and the impact of that for many, many years on people's lives. That was one of the things, and not everybody knows the detail of this and why they were done. Not just how they were done, but why they were done in the first place, and that there were no black South African citizens in South Africa because they all belonged to what was originally called the Bantustans and then the homelands. So if you were living in Soweto, you were not really South African, even though you were born there, etc., etc. So all of these laws created this, what we call the psychological damage of racism over all the years, and the power of that. So racial healing is to try and reverse that situation. That's what it is, to try and reverse the polarization that has been created and the psychological damage that has been created by 300 years of systemic racism. So racism really is the belief that one group is superior to another, the inherent belief that I'm born superior to you. Not just I've become superior, I am born that way. Okay, which is quite hectic. And a lot of people that we meet, particularly young black people, suffering from what we call the imposter syndrome, who feel that they don't really deserve to be in the positions that they are in, because of this sense of self-doubt and lack of self-confidence, because they've been told by their parents that they are also inherently inferior.
Sure.
And so they cannot work in the environment, and then, of course, they can't be as productive as they should be. And when we talk about that, we know that South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, right? We know that, the most unequal country in the world. And at the same time, when it comes to productivity, we rank number 61 out of 65 countries that were actually surveyed. So you've got these two things. On the one hand, we are hopeless with productivity, and on the other hand, we're the most unequal society in the world. And clearly, the one impacts on the other.
Sure.
If people, are not being productive, it's because of the inequality that we face in this country. And that comes with the poverty and the unemployment and the crime and the alcohol abuse and that we have to challenge sort of every day, in terms of our lives in South Africa. So racial healing then starts to actually work on how you can acknowledge and then understand the need in terms of the psychological damage that has been created. That's what racial healing is about. And we have to understand that we're going to be able to talk to people, we're going to have to learn about people. There are two main areas. One is education. Educate yourself about the history of the country so that you understand how we got into this mess in the first place. And then also, of course, try and interact with as many people that are different to you as possible so you can understand their stories and learn about them and know why they think the way they do. So these are all the things that we need to do. We need to have courageous conversations. And we need to ask ourselves, how can we as individuals start to work on racial healing? How can we contribute to this thing? And there's like 4 phases of the process of racial healing. The one is self-discovery. You firstly need to understand who you are. How did you become like this? How did you get the paradigms that you live with every day from your parents and from your education and all that? I call it your book of rules. And your book of rules dictates your behavior. And it explains to you why you behave the way you do and how you react to different things. And there you've got biases, you've got unconscious bias. Talking about unconscious bias, I think back in the early 2000s, I was about to fly on a plane. Yeah. And if you had told me that I had any racial bias, I would have been quite upset with you. And there I am sitting in the plane, and the pilot comes over the air and he starts talking, and immediately I could tell that it was a black pilot from the accent. And I said, oh shit. I thought to myself, hey, my God, how are we going to get to Cape Town? And then I realized, wow, that was so racist. Yeah. What did I just think, right? And I thought, okay, I can never call myself a person without any racial bias, because who knows what else is lying dormant there in the dark, deep recesses of my mind. So yes, we have this unconscious bias which we need to address from time to time. And so, okay, those 4 phases, you need to firstly discover yourself and understand how you became what you are, and learn about your paradigms and the blockers, and about paradigm paralysis, which is a kind of thing that says you can't change, you don't know how to change, you don't understand the need for change, you get stuck in your beliefs, you don't listen to other people. Or paradigm flexibility, where you are open to change, and you will listen to other people, you don't mind being wrong, etc., and you're willing to learn from others. So if we get stuck into paradigm paralysis, we're going to go backwards. If we become more flexible, we'll start going forwards. And then you get the letting go phase. And the letting go phase is where you start to let go of some of the old things that you've hung on to for all your life. And now you have to let those go. And it's quite uncomfortable to let these things go and to realize that you have had these beliefs for so long. But the important thing about discomfort is that is the birthplace of change. So with these courageous conversations, which become very uncomfortable, that is where the change starts to take place. And we need to make people uncomfortable because nothing is going to change from a position of comfort. Right? And that's how we're going to kind of move forward with racial healing. And then finally, we're going to look at the healing process where people start to recognize that it's up to me to change. It starts with me. It's not someone else. I'm not going to be able to go out and change other people. There's an old saying by a guy called Rumi who said that yesterday I thought I was clever, so I tried to change other people, but today I became wise, so I tried to change myself.
Sure.